Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping right into the astrology of March 3, 2026 today,
We are indeed.
and we're focusing our lens on a highly impactful full moon and lunar eclipse in Virgo. You know the drill by now. You're tuning in because you want the synthesized, high-signal knowledge without slogging through all the noise.
Right.
So our framework for today's exploration comes from Tarot by HIC. You can find that at tarot.hic.net. We're looking at their detailed astrological forecast, plus this beautifully crafted allegorical narrative they call a StoryScope.
Yeah, it's a dense, incredibly rich set of source material. And because we're talking to someone who already grasps the basic architecture of a star chart, we can bypass the beginner definitions today.
Exactly. We can just get straight into the mechanics of this specific transit.
Right. Our objective today is to really map out how these celestial movements directly mirror our most stubborn psychological tendencies. We're looking at how this Virgo eclipse acts as a pressure test for our daily habits, our reliance on control, and, well, our overall trajectory.
The combination of the technical forecast and the StoryScope gives us this brilliant dual lens.
Yeah.
Because it gives us the precise astrological weather and then immediately grounds it in a human narrative.
Yeah, so you can actually feel what that weather is like on the ground.
Exactly. Which is exactly what we need for an eclipse, right?
Oh, absolutely. Understanding the geometry of an alignment is one thing, but navigating the psychological undertow it creates, that is another thing entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with the core event, the Virgo full moon and lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
And I got to say, the language used by Tarot, by HIC, to describe this energy is not light.
No, it's definitely not.
It's characterized as initiatory, purifying, and revelatory. We're looking at a signature that brings rapid dramatic change and really intense emotional release.
Yeah.
Now, purifying is one of those words that sounds spiritually pleasant until you realize that purification in nature usually involves immense heat or pressure.
Right. And that is a really critical distinction to make right away. When we hear words like dramatic change pair with an eclipse, the immediate instinct is to just brace for impact.
Naturally.
But a Virgo eclipse operates on a very specific frequency. It refines, it does not destroy. The text actually calls it purification through moonlight.
Purification through moonlight. I like that.
It's described as a karmic cleansing. So it's not about burning the structural foundations of your life to the ground. It's about eliminating the habits, the mental scripts, the daily routines that simply do not match the person you are actively becoming.
So it's kind of the difference between a controlled demolition and a surgical extraction.
Exactly.
And the framework provides a very pragmatic tool for this.
Yeah.
They talk about the concept of the eclipse as a cosmic progress report.
Yes. Eclipses function as markers of changing life directions. They highlight where we've been and where we're heading.
Right. So for you listening right now, you are prompted to initiate a 6-month look back. Just trace your steps back half a year from March 3, 2026. What projects were you initiating? What relationships were shifting?
What subtle intentions were you setting?
Yeah.
And the look back is where the abstraction becomes actionable. If you look back 6 months and realize that certain seeds you planted have yielded absolutely nothing.
Like the energy is completely stagnant.
Right, the momentum never materialized. Well, this eclipse provides the exact cosmic weather required to let them go. You clear out the deadwood.
Just cut it loose.
Cut it loose. However, the inverse is equally true. If you spot areas where things are showing signs of life, even if they're messy or imperfect, this is the exact moment to double down.
Right.
You invest your resources, your time, your focus to nurture those sprouting seeds.
It really demands a ruthless honesty about where we are directing our daily energy.
Yeah.
Like, are we watering dead soil purely out of habit?
We do that a lot.
We do. Which naturally brings up the question of why we hold on so tightly to deadwood in the first place. And that brings us to the placement of the South Node in Virgo during this transit.
What's fascinating here is what the South Node reveals about our collective comfort zones and our karmic past. Historically, when we're dealing with this Virgo placement, we base our underlying sense of safety entirely on our ability to control our environment.
Oh, wow.
We equate security with our capacity to plan ahead, to anticipate every single variable, and to know exactly what is coming next.
We see this constantly, right? In our professional lives, in our personal households. We just fall into this severe trap of perfectionism.
Oh, absolutely.
We tell ourselves, if I just manage this project flawlessly, if I map out every single contingency, I will be safe.
Right.
But there is a massive difference between healthy preparedness and toxic overmanagement. The eclipse illuminates the areas where that inner dialogue has crossed the line into chronic anxiety.
We essentially mistake vigilance for devotion. We convince ourselves that if we're constantly worrying about something, constantly finding faults and trying to improve it, it means we care deeply about it.
But it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. That relentless criticism, whether it's directed inward at ourselves or outward at others, it ultimately strangles growth. The evolutionary challenge of this alignment going forward is to completely abandon that fault-finding mechanism.
Okay, but that is a really tall order.
It is.
If someone's entire operating system is built on anticipating problems to feel secure, asking them to just drop the criticism...
Feels like asking them to step off a ledge without a harness.
Exactly.
It does. But the path forward requires cultivating non-judgment and compassion. We're being challenged to transition from a state of requiring absolute control to a state of faith.
Trusting in positive outcomes without micromanaging the process.
Exactly. And the source is very upfront about the reality of this transition. Relief eventually comes from gaining a broader perspective and being adaptable, prioritizing spiritual growth. But the initial phase of lasting change, it is almost always uncomfortable.
Yeah, the text is clear that it is disruptive, it's chaotic, and it feels like a total loss of footing.
Right. We have to build the capacity to sit in that discomfort without immediately rushing to fix it. We want immediate resolution, but the eclipse energy demands that we let the process unfold, however messy it looks in the moment.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Because this eclipse isn't happening in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Alongside the full moon, we have 3 distinct planetary crosswinds from the forecast that add immense texture to the experience.
Yes, the aspects.
Right. We aren't just dealing with the overarching theme of refinement, we are dealing with specific concurrent astrological alignments. First, the full moon sits directly opposite Mercury, which is retrograde.
And an opposition inherently creates a tug of war. In this case, it's between our emotional instinctual self, which is the moon, and our logical processing mind, which is Mercury.
And with Mercury retrograde in this position,
our internal dialogue is going to be incredibly amplified. And we're not just talking about superficial mental chatter here. Expect unavoidable insights bubbling up to the surface. Old conversations, overlooked details, delayed information. They will present themselves and demand synthesis.
So it's like friction forcing a realization.
Exactly. The truth is coming through a hyper-focus on accuracy and detail.
Then we look at the sextile to Jupiter. Now, a sextile is generally a cooperative, supportive aspect, and Jupiter brings expansion. But the way Tarot by Hisiki frames this specific Jupiter connection is incredibly nuanced.
It really is. Jupiter offers protection and a much-needed widening of our perspective. But the critical caveat here is how that perspective arrives. If an insight generated by that Mercury opposition ends up surprising you, or, more importantly, humbling you, regarding your perfectly laid plans, you have to recognize that humbling as a mechanism for growth.
It isn't a punishment.
No, it's the exact perspective shift required to invite abundance into the situation.
So the ego hit is actually the key to the lock.
Yes.
Finally, we have the full moon forming a square to the point of fortune. Squares always indicate tension that forces action, and connecting that to the point of fortune gives this entire transit what the text describes as a fated undertone.
And when you pull all 3 of these aspects together, the unavoidable mental insights, the humbling expansion of Jupiter, and the tension with the point of fortune, you get a very cohesive narrative.
A bigger picture.
Right. The shifts unfolding right now are not random coincidences. They're fundamental course corrections. You might experience rerouting, sudden roadblocks, or results that look entirely different from your meticulous blueprints.
But those adjustments are happening for a reason?
Exactly. These adjustments, however jarring, are ultimately aligning you with your authentic path.
It's the ultimate recalculating moment. Like on a GPS.
Yeah.
You might be forced off your preferred highway, but you're being navigated to the correct destination.
Perfect analogy.
Now, to truly internalize these mechanics, we have to look at how Tarot by He grounds them in the StoryScope, because they provided this allegorical narrative titled Under the Correcting Moon. And it translates all this dense astrological data into a highly resonant human experience.
Allegory is often the most efficient way to bypass our intellectual defenses. We can nod along to the concept of releasing control all day long, but when we see a character embody our exact neuroses, the insight penetrates much deeper.
Oh, absolutely. So let's walk through the narrative. The setting is a village on the night of the eclipse. The villagers are gathering at the river, and they are literally carrying their ledgers. the actual bound books where they tally up their actions, their debts, their progress.
It is the ultimate manifestation of that Virgo need to catalog and account for everything.
Exactly. And observing them is an old apothecary who is deliberately grinding rosemary. He serves as the voice of the eclipse's wisdom. He watches the villagers clutching their rigid accounts and says, "The moon will not take from you. She will show you what you have miscounted."
Which perfectly echoes the core theme we discussed earlier. This is an event of illumination and refinement, not arbitrary destruction.
So the focus then shifts to our protagonist, Elowen. Now, instead of a heavy ledger, Elowen brings a basket to the river filled with seemingly mundane objects. She has a cracked teacup she'd been meaning to mend, a bundle of unsent letters, and an old ribbon she kept purely out of habit.
Yeah.
And the narrative gives us this piercing look into her psyche. For the past 6 months, she has been measuring her life entirely in increments of improvement, lists, timetables, endless corrections.
And there's that devastating realization we touched on earlier. The text says she had mistaken vigilance for devotion.
Oof, that line hits hard.
It really does. She believed that her hypervigilance, her constant scanning for flaws in her life, was evidence of her commitment to living well. But the reality is that she had turned her own existence into an exhausting optimization project. She embodies the shadow side of the South Node in Virgo perfectly.
So as the physical eclipse deepens, the shadow is crossing the moon, the light is thinning, and turning this metallic copper, Elowen feels a physical tightness in her throat, a constriction that she has long rationalized as just being responsible.
Right, and then the apothecary prompts the villagers with the exact 6-month look-back we discussed. He calls out, "What did you begin? What did you abandon? What did you control so tightly it could not grow?"
That last question is the fulcrum of your realization. When Elowen reflects on the seeds she planted half a year ago, both literal seeds in her garden and metaphorical ones, like a decision to forgive someone or a promise to return to her painting, she sees her fatal flaw.
She sees what she actually did.
Yeah. She prepared the soil beautifully. She watered the ground with immense discipline. But the moment the first shoots appeared, and they were inevitably uneven and imperfect, she panicked.
She couldn't handle the messiness of organic growth.
No. So she corrected them, she pruned the uneven leaves, she adjusted the stems, and she kept managing them until nothing remained but perfectly orderly, empty earth.
Wow.
She essentially overmanaged her own potential out of existence just because it didn't look perfect in its infancy.
And then the ritual of release occurs. As the shadow fully eclipses the moon, the light on the river is described as honest. And in this unsparing light, Elowen looks at her wrists and sees her psychological habits manifested as literal physical objects.
With threads.
Yes. They appear as thin, gray threads woven tightly around her arms, bearing heavy labels like should, not yet, and improve. She had tied them there herself, fully believing they were protective charms keeping her life together.
And the apothecary speaks again, basically redefining the entire concept of fixing something. He whispers, "Refinement is not punishment. Release is correction."
It's such a profound shift. Sometimes the only way to correct a situation is to completely take your hands off it.
So Elowen wades into the freezing water. She lowers the cracked teacup first. The moonlight hits the fracture. And crucially, it does not magically mend the break. It simply illuminates the shape of it.
Right.
This triggers an immense wave of self-compassion. She sees how relentlessly she had scolded herself for every minor flaw. She was treating her own heart as a renovation project that was perpetually behind schedule.
And as she begins to mentally untie those gray threads of habit, the narrative does not romanticize the process. The release isn't described as this wave of instant peace.
Not at all.
As the threads dissolve like salt in the water, each release sends a tremor through her. It's disorienting. It's a brief chaos of sensation.
Which perfectly maps to the astrological reality we talked about. When you finally drop a control mechanism you've relied on for years, you feel exposed. You feel panicked.
Yeah. But Elowen does the one thing required of us during this transit. She doesn't rush to fix the discomfort. She allows the feeling of bareness and chaos to simply move through her system without intervening.
And on the other side of that tolerance for discomfort, she finds spaciousness. She can finally take a full breath.
Yeah.
But the most vital part of the story happens as she returns to the riverbank. In the trampled soil near where she was standing, she spots tiny green shoots.
The unmeasured shoots.
Yes.
The narrative really emphasizes that she did not plant these that night. They were seeds sown months ago that had somehow escaped her strict tending. They survived and sprouted precisely because she had overlooked them.
She hadn't been micromanaging their progress.
Exactly. She realizes then that some seeds require significantly less correction and a much deeper capacity for trust.
So what does this all mean? How do we take the geometry of the planets and the poetry of the StoryScope and forge a practical operating philosophy for you, the listener, right now?
Well, synthesizing the forecast and the allegory leads us to a radical redefinition of what it means to evolve. True growth is not about maintaining a perfectly managed ledger. It's not about eliminating every flaw through exhausting self-criticism.
Right.
Look at the apothecary at the end of the narrative. When he gathers the villagers' ledgers, he doesn't destroy the books. He simply removes the densely written, tallied pages and hands back only the blank ones, telling them for what grows next.
It is the ultimate clean slate, achieved through subtraction, not addition. And Elowen's final choices really drive this home.
They do.
She leaves the ribbon, the empty habit, in the river. But she keeps the unsent letters. She commits to sending one the next day, accepting that it will be imperfectly written, but knowing that it will be alive.
And that is Virgo refinement working correctly. It trades sterile perfection for authentic vitality. The overarching demand of this eclipse is to recognize where our vigilance has become a detriment.
We have to learn to trust the messy, unmeasured shoots in our own lives.
Exactly. When our meticulously plotted plans are disrupted by these cosmic crosswinds, we have to trust the recalculation. The rerouting is aligning us with a much more authentic destination.
As Elowen walks home from the river, she makes a profound choice. She deliberately refuses to draft a new plan. She doesn't catalog her recent insights into a new spreadsheet of self-improvement.
No.
The narrative states that she felt the unfamiliar wideness of uncertainty, and she simply allowed it to remain unresolved. And that is exactly where we want to leave you today.
Yeah.
Think deeply about the landscape of your own life right now. What is the one specific project, relationship, or goal where you are obsessively overmanaging, constantly checking the metrics, and trying to force a perfect outcome? And what would happen if, just for today, you stepped completely back, felt that unfamiliar wideness of uncertainty, and allowed that situation to remain completely unresolved?
It is a profound challenge, and it's the exact medicine this transit requires.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.